But as we know, in the immediacy of George Floyd's death in May 2020, following outright misreporting with regards to how he died, a group of thugs, outright liars and pseudo-intellectual sophists known as Black Lives Matter mobilised around Floyd's death as a means of taking over the entire culture industry. Their aim, as we know, is not to end racism, but completely redefine what we understand racism to be in a way that's fundamentally racist.
That's the thing I always find funny. You can see them all there taking the knee, their shirts, end racism. Okay, do it.
Yeah.
Do it then. Okay, end racism, then stop making race such a pivotal factor in the way that relationships between people are considered.
Absolutely. This is what anti-racists have been saying for about 100 years, until, of course, the subversion started.
Until anti-racism took on a whole new meaning.
Yes. Became its opposite. But anyway, Colin Kaepernick's gesture, the taking of the knee, renewed itself as a symbol of anti-racism in 2020 to spread like a mind virus throughout the entire sports industry ever since, which has continued to be the case, I'm afraid to say. Premier League teams are still taking the knee every single week, insisting that it isn't political. And Formula One even reserved a special place in its schedule during the race or before the race for the drivers to be the centre of attention so that everyone could applaud them for their stunning bravery, as you can see over here. Maybe you guys at home can see it as well. Oh, yes, they did.
Oh, no.
But there is some good news on the subject of motorsport, at least. And that is that Stefano Domenicali, the CEO of the Formula One group, has announced that F1 drivers will no longer be allowed to take the knee before the start of the race.
Based.
So, if we scroll down a little bit, Formula One will no longer set time for drivers to take the knee ahead of races, as it looks to introduce more concrete actions to combat racism, Chief Executive Stefano Domenicali told Sky Sport on Tuesday. Formula One launched its We Race as One diversity, inclusion and sustainability platform in 2020, which included a pre-race moment when drivers gathered on the grid to express their support for the initiative with a gesture of their choice. I think it was the time to move from just a gesture recognising something that's really important to a plan, Domenicali said. I think the gesture has been an important gesture because we need to respect everyone as always, but now is the time to move on and take some other action.
So they're basically just going, right, you've had your chance, you've done it enough, now we're just moving on, guys. Time to close up shop, come on.
Yes, it's time to stop virtue signaling and start acting on the virtue. Now, of course, this doesn't necessarily mean good news, and I'm afraid to say it doesn't. But as you would expect, some have not taken this news very well at all, as you can see from someone who works for the Hamilton Access. Why is Stefano Domenicali, a white man, deciding when it's time to move on matters that have never concerned him? If the fight is for the inclusive and diverse sport, why aren't black people making these decisions? What do you know about this gesture? Well, I can tell you one thing, Danny. I've never heard of you before seeing this tweet, I'm afraid to say, but sport has absolutely no interest in diversity or inclusivity. Sport is pretty much just the epitome of excellence in one particular thing. Sport, whatever race you are, that shouldn't have any importance with regard. I'm just preaching to the choir here, but it shouldn't have anything to do with how we understand sport.
Well, we all know this, that sport was one of the first areas wherein racial boundaries got broken, purely because of the fact that it is taken entirely off of the idea of, are you good at the sport?
Yeah.
And if you're fantastic at the sport, especially if you're working on a national level with national teams, if the best guys playing a particular sport in your country are black in a time where you don't like black people that much, well, guess what? You're either going to have to take on those black people or handicap your team.
Yes.
So it was one of the first areas where people could really break through.
Yeah, and whoever wins, regardless of their race, it is a sort of sporting achievement. Not an achievement for a particular minority, but an achievement for the competitor who wins it. That's part of the beauty of it. The very reason we can get behind these things is because it has universal value across the world, which is why sport is innately progressive and doesn't need Black Lives Matter to guide it towards equality. But anyway, to be more explicit, the Hamilton Access's position here seems to be that only, well, at least this is what I've read, seems to be that only black people should be allowed to make decisions on the future of sport, or at least that's what's implied here. You could say that well, if you actually, I don't know, replaced black with something else, that would amount to being a certain form of supremacy, would it not?
Yes.
But then, but I'm afraid there's more cope as we can get up here. Yes, from Treacle. So F1 will no longer have to take the knee gesture ceremony. Now they have their first white world drivers champion since 2016. They don't need to. Are we now finding out exactly why Abu Dhabi was manipulated? I know that you're not an F1 buff, but Abu Dhabi was an absolute farce because they basically just changed the rules in short so that there could be a last lap showdown between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen won because Lewis was on worn tyres. It should never have got to that. And he was robbed of his 8th world championship.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to be honest about that. But that has absolutely nothing to do with race and everything to do with the fact that Michael Massey just wanted to make a spectacle because it would make money. So,
also, is this tweet implying that because of the fact that we've got a world driving champion who's white for the first time in years, they've finally gone, right, now's the opportunity, guys, we could be racist again?
What's being assumed is that because we now don't have a black world champion, Lewis Hamilton, of course, that this is just a form of cope from the FIA that finally we can drop our tools and go back to being the white supremacist institution that we always were, which is absolutely nonsense. But it's just a load of absolute nonsense, basically. But anyway, we must move on forward to explain why this is not entirely good news. There's a particular reason why the FIA have made this move, and it isn't because they see the gesture as counterproductive and cringeworthy, as obviously we hoped will be the reason. It's because they've opted to extend their non-white engineering scholarship program, which they haven't called it a non-white engineering scholarship program, but this is what it is, as I will explain in a minute. I didn't know about this until yesterday, but they've extended it until 2025. So if we scroll down a little bit so I can read it out, Formula One has announced that it will extend its funding commitment to the Formula One Engineering Scholarship Programme for unrepresented groups until 2025, continuing its drive to increase diversity within the sport. The Formula One Engineering Scholarships were launched last year following a US £1 million donation from a US $1 million donation, I should say, from non-executive chairman of Formula One, Chase Carey. The programme has so far successfully supported 10 students who have begun placements in their undergraduate and postgraduate engineering degrees at leading universities in the UK and Italy. Each scholarship covers the full cost of a student's tuition, together with living expenses for the full duration of their degree, so very generous. The programme will now be extended for a further 4 years, enabling scholarships to be offered to 10 more students each year from 2022 to 25, inclusive. Now, everyone try not to vomit at this part coming up. We are committed to increasing diversity and opportunity within this incredible sport, said F1's president and CEO Stefano Domenicali. And I am pleased to confirm that we will be expanding our programme for scholars until 2025, providing fantastic opportunity for some incredibly talented students to begin their journeys with Formula One. We want to continue to ensure that their talent from unrepresented groups has meaningful opportunities, with the first 10 scholars already beginning their studies following Chase's incredible donation to fund the scholars in their first year. We want to continue and build on the foundations of the programme in the years ahead. So yeah, they're replacing a pretty empty gesture with a commitment to extending a scholarship that, by the sounds of it, gives preference to those not deemed to be or considered as privileged.
I hate that term in this context as well, because by deeming them as not being privileged and then therefore handing them out entitlements, you are creating an inherent contradiction by making them a new privileged class all in itself.
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous contradiction.
No, it's absolutely insane. But Cambridge University is one of the partners in this project, so let's take a look at the application form, shall we? If we scroll down a bit so you can actually see the eligibility criteria, what do you notice isn't on it? So it says to be eligible for the F1 scholarship, applicants must either identify as female and have any category of ethnicity, or identify as male and have one of the following categories of ethnicity: Bangladeshi, Pakistani, Black African, Black Caribbean, Black other, mixed white/black. What's missing?
Good God. I know that this has been going on for ages. I know that this has been something that has been building for a while, and it's something that special interest groups have been pushing for years. I still find it shocking to see literal racial eligibility criteria, and the fact that there's no white people allowed unless you're mixed, and no Asians either, other than Bangladeshi and Pakistani.
Yeah.
There are more Asians than just from those two areas.
See, the fact that we almost feel kind of somber, or shall we say bored, and have low energy in discussing cases like this is because it's become almost so normal.
I hate it. The fact that it has become so normalized, like, it really does sicken me to a certain extent, because of the fact that I and I assume you as well grew up in an era that was beginning to reach a sort of, not necessarily entirely, but sort of post-racial society, at least in the way that, you know, civilians would interact and communicate with one another. All for this to just bring us screaming back into the 1960s.
It's almost if we've reverted back to myth just after we hit the right spot. That's what it feels like. But as you can see, like the University of York scholarship that I drew attention to a few weeks ago, this is a scholarship that, well, non-white people are implicitly prohibited from applying for, because it doesn't actually say whites don't apply, because that would, you know, be explicit racism. But that would sound like Jim Crow or something. Yes, but in practice, I'm afraid to say this is what this amounts to. And so take note, viewers, if you're white, poor and or disabled by whatever extent, F1 doesn't want you because you're too privileged to apply for it. Sounds a bit like racism to me, but anyway, if we go back to the first page, the very first page, and scroll right down to the very bottom. Not to the very bottom, but the very bottom of the text, because it's the second to last, but there we are. So it says, working with the Black Collective of Media and Sport, a leading group for black professionals in the media, and the Blair Project, who are inspiring the next generation of engineers from disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds, F1 has already welcomed into the organisation apprentices who are studying mechanical engineering and interns who, with more to be appointed later this season. So I'd quite like to have a look at some of these.
So they're working with the collection of black professional communists.
Yes. Shall we have a look at who they're working with? Let's take a look at the Blair Project to begin with. If you scroll down a bit, you'll see a familiar face. Or at least I did when it came up. Yeah, the tab wasn't quite as big as that when I opened it up.
Well, we can squint a little bit to get the right so that we can see the image properly. Where is the image? Give John a second. He's just sorting this out for us.
Because it is too hilarious to miss. But
there we go. That seems to have fixed it a bit.
Well, it does actually have a picture of Prince Harry right on the front. Yeah, there we are.
Oh, there he is. Oh, there he is in the background.
You can see him pumping a fist right in the background there.
He never misses an opportunity nowadays to be in the background of someone else's photograph.
Yeah. And if you scroll down just a little bit, you can see that they're uttering what the buzzwords of, there we are, diversity and inclusion, but they're mainly just committed to making karting kind of more ecologically sustainable and accessible, so that more people of all backgrounds can get into sport. Of course, doing this under the concept of diversity is counterproductive, as we all know.
They also going into climate change activism. You're in racing, you're burning a lot of fuel, really doing your work for the climate there.
Yes, it's a shame because if we move on to the next page within this page now, which is here, so the Blair Project. If we scroll down, so we can see the text a little bit. There we are.
John's just fixing it up again.
Yeah. So the Blair Project is a disruptive social enterprise that exists to inspire the next generation of high-tech engineers through electric karting and digital manufacturing, and design project-based activities to infuse young people to pursue careers in the fast-growth science, engineering, technology, and digital sectors. You see, it would be a shame, because if it wasn't for this commitment to diversity, which is intrinsically problematic, I'd be all in favour of this project. You know, it sounds perfectly fine and actually quite meaningful. But
I know I say I hate the use of a lot of terms in this segment, but the use of the term disruptive.
That part of it's obnoxious. I don't even know what they mean by it.
Well, it's one of those things where they're taking, I assume what they mean is that they're taking the normative aspects of society and tearing them apart so that they can create a new foundation to build society on. Using racing, that's generally speaking what they use those terms like disruptive.
If that's the intended message, then screw them, it's rubbish. I've got nothing to do with it. But if we move on to the Black Collective of Media and Sports homepage, so I took a look at them, and guess what? I found them to be kind of a little bit sensationalistic. If you scroll down, you can actually see their statement.
The black communists, the British wing of the Black Panthers, are a bit sensationalist.
Yes, I mean, just take a look at this. How bad are things in the sports media? Take a moment to reflect on the engagement and participation of black communities in sport. It is estimated that up to 30% of professional footballers in the English Premier. You can already see where this is going. I needn't even really read it out. I feel like a broken record. Focusing on inequality of outcome says nothing about inequality in the process, and it never has, unless you take the time to look at, for example, how many black people who are applying for these positions and then assess that outcome with respect to their credentials. So pressure groups arguing for just having a larger demographic of people within a certain trade or industry, I've said time and time again, don't care for the trade or industry itself, and we should not listen to them because they don't care about the sports or the sports media. They're explicit in their position that they're happy for sports or whatever, for all of society for that matter, I would say, to break down for as long as they see more diversity at the peak of the pyramid. Diversity means nothing. It means it is just an abstract metaphysics. That's all it is.
It's a buzzword at this point. I wouldn't even necessarily want to grant it the grandiosity of the term metaphysics, because it's just a buzzword.
Pseudo-metaphysics.
Yeah. It just gets people's heads switched on. They think diversity, they think that means good. If I support diversity, I am good person.
Well, I did actually do some further investigating on this site and managed to find a video which I believe covers one of their D-word conferences. And you can imagine what that D-word is. And this is, I imagine, an event where they have kind of media professionals who are presumably black mixed with others, who come to discuss how we proceed from their point of view. I found myself absolutely aghast with the editing. Not so much the conference itself, even though that's bad enough, but the editing of this. So let's give it a watch, shall we?
What on earth? I'm in the club, boys.
What is this?
Okay, so for anybody not watching and just listening, we're not just watching, a compilation of club bangers or anything. What we're seeing are... Oh... Is it going to actually go into... Nope, it's... we were seeing a compilation of clips of
the statement of intent, basically.
The reason why we don't have
here we go.
more black writers is they don't believe they can do it. They think it's a white class-dominated industry
Structural
that
white
doesn't cater for them.
Okay. I could barely
we need to do more, but I think there's sometimes a little bit of a poverty of aspiration sometimes that people probably don't come to us and say, what are you going to do on an individual basis, on a general basis, and I think we need to be pushed.
Well, from what they're basically saying is that the disparity between demographics is the problem. The very fact that you have so many white people assuming places in sports media is precisely why black people feel impoverished in their own minds to want to pursue careers in it. And as much as I'm sympathetic with why someone may think that, it's only because you subscribe to the racial narrative that they're not going to accept you because you're of a different race.
It's a very strange and self-defeating mindset to take on.
It is.
I just want to point out once again, for anybody who wasn't watching, that was a compilation of clips from the conference that was being done, where everybody seemed to be very mild-mannered and having discussions with one another. For some reason, set to that music, I would just say, I hope a white person edited that, because if that editing was a display of black excellence, you're not doing yourself a favour.
I mean, there are two types of people who produce a video like this. The first person who comes to mind is Colin Kaepernick himself.
Yes, well,
because he's a moron.
Yeah, he is a moron, and any opportunity for sort of self-aggrandizement or marketing is going to be right up his alley.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as I had the displeasure of seeing the trailer for his Netflix series, I pretty much just lost hope.
Yeah, it doesn't make the whole thing...
Not that I had any hope before.
It doesn't make the whole thing seem particularly professional, does it?
But there is actually another type of person who produces a video like this, and that's someone who's actively trying to make a mockery of their entire project.
Yeah, it came across like a parody that felt like something out of Brass Eye.
Yeah.
Here's our diversity and equity, and it just comes out with some like club bangers dropping off the ground. Oh God!
Look, this is where pursuing excellence leads you. That is what the message of that is when you use that music to present that. I mean, as again, flawed as the philosophy is, insofar as the content of what's being discussed is concerned, that just hammers home how absurdly insane they are. And if we can actually have or the person who edited that video, if that's even representative of what they're trying to do, but
diversity mood film.
Diversity mood.
Let me get you into the spiritual diversity space.
But I'd like to end with just having a look at their statement on the D word. We don't have much time, so I won't cover it for very long. But it should be on the I think just a little bit further up. Yes. Yeah, just at the top.
There it is, John, just with where it starts with the D word.
The argument against diversity has always been that employers want the best. But the D word challenged decision makers focus on redefining what we mean by the best.
Whoever can win.
Well, I'm sorry, what else is the best supposed to be defined by? If the best is not defined by the industry that you want to go in, what does the best amount to it, or what you decide that it is?
Well, in sports, the best literally means who wins.
Yes.
That's all it means. It doesn't need to mean who's got the right colour skin tone or anything.
So this
Christ.
is an explicit declaration, really, of intent that they want to change what the best amounts to. They don't want the best to be defined as well in accordance to professional excellence, if you like. They want to subordinate it into intersectionality.
Well, they want the competition to be highest percentage of melanin.
Yeah. So anyway, to summarise, whilst the news about F1 drivers no longer being able to take the knee is a welcome relief for many of us, it is structurally very much committed to the insane diversity agenda still. If these are the people shaping its future, I'm genuinely concerned, both for industry and sports, just because of the philosophy behind the changes being made. Needless to say, race should never be considered as an antecedent principle for employment or a basis to restructure an institution. End of story.
If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can always go over to lotuseaters.com and subscribe to support us. We don't do any adverts. And you can also check out all of our premium content, such as our book club. This is a really excellent episode by Harry, based on a book called The Grey Lady Winked, which is all of those times where the New York Times was guilty of spreading a lot of fake news. It's a really, really good and informative look at how the New York Times is trading on a reputation it really doesn't deserve. And if you enjoy it, you can go and congratulate Harry on doing such a good job on getter.com, where he's at Harry Lotus Eater. Thanks very much.